The Novation Circuit Rhythm recently got a neat little firmware update, so today I'm here to walk you through it and show you some of the possibilities that come as a result. I should mention, Novation did tell me about this in advance, but at the time, there was no documentation for it, and I was super busy with life stuff, so I didn't get a chance to have a video ready for launch day, because that wasn't even nailed down at the time. But now, it's out, I've had a chance to dig into it, so here's what I've found. Let's start with the quickest thing and also the most highly requested thing, which is the saving of mute states in scenes. If you're not familiar, scenes are combinations of patterns that can be launched like patterns, and previously the only thing they could contain was combinations of patterns. Now, they can also contain mute states, which was very much asked for, and that's also coming to the circuit tracks a bit later. Novation confirmed that on Twitter, but we don't know when yet at the time of this recording. So let me show you how this works. Go to Mixer, and if you want to save your scenes, hit Shift, and then you can select any of these pads. So here's the key. To turn on the saving of mute states in scenes, press this button right here. You can see it's ever so slightly brighter than these pads, which are not lit up. Now that it's lit up white, it will save mute states. So let's go to this scene here, and let's just mute a whole bunch of stuff, and then hold down Shift, press this to save it, and now, when I toggle these scenes, your mute states are saved. But do note that you actually have to save that state. So if you just do some quick temporary muting on the fly, it doesn't get passed through unless you actually hold down Shift and select a scene to save that state in. So if you don't need that feature, you can just basically ignore it. And then if you do want it, that's fairly easy to deal with. Up next is the feature that they've been kind of touting the most, which is the new beat matching feature. And I want to be very clear about something up front. This is not time stretching. Changing the tempo of your sample will still change the pitch and vice versa. Those are interlinked, and that looks like it's just not gonna change. So set your expectations up front. With that being said, I've got some breaks and loops on here. For instance, this break right here. And so let's just put it in the sequencer. You gotta make sure that that sample is selected. Go into sample mode, and you now have these two extra buttons here. And these will either speed up or slow down the sample to get it to match the project's tempo. So let's just go slow down. It went by quite a lot, or speed up. Some important things to note. First of all, it doesn't detect the BPM of your sample. It does it purely based off of your sample's length. So however long your sample is, it'll just pitch it up or down to stretch it out or compress it to fit the amount of time that it needs to. And so if you want to get this to work, you do need something that is a perfect loop. Fortunately, if you're getting stuff out of sample packs and stuff, that's pretty much guaranteed. Or if you're creating loops for yourself, that's just something you want to keep in mind. It does need to be a perfect loop for this to work properly. So we've got this in time with the grid. I can start adding other stuff. And it is in perfect time, so that's nice. Here's the thing to keep in mind. If I now go and change the tempo, and I go to my sample that I was beat matching, it's just turned this off. The second you change the tempo, it turns off beat matching and just goes, nope, not going to deal with that. I would love to see the tempo knob and these stay linked, because that could get some pretty cool sounding effects. That's not the case. So if you change the tempo, remember to go back and wait, and remember to change it back. Also, if you switch out the sample, you also have to do that again. So now let's say I've switched this out. You'll hear it's not in time again because this has been turned off once again. So you do kind of have to manage it a bit. You kind of have to make sure that if you make changes to your tempo or if you swap out the sample, that you go back and turn it back on. I've created a mess here. And by the way, this is how I created this beat. This is 170 BPM break, slowed way the hell down. I've cut some lows, add some distortion. I've done the same to this loop right here. And I've done the same to this melodic loop. However, because it's changing the pitch, it might not change your melodic loops to be like perfectly in key. In this case, it actually worked out pretty well. And that's kind of a vibe. That's kind of a fun way to build stuff up. This gets into like a little bit of SP404 territory, especially with the next thing I'm about to show you. And by the way, I have finally gotten my hands on an SP404 Mark II. I am struggling through learning it. There will be a video on it at God knows when. Regardless, here's the next thing that was added in the firmware update, and that is fixed sample length. So to get to that, go to sample record and select an empty slot. I'm going to select this sample slot right here. And once you've selected a slot, you'll notice this pad lit up. So let me just do that again. Select this and watch this. This lit up. And so now I can press this and set sample recording length to fixed. And it does it in increments of 8 steps. So this button just turns it on and off. And then this is 8 steps all the way up to 64 steps, aka 4 bars. I'm going to go ahead and set this just to 2 bars for now. And I've also got my recording set to threshold. So if I hit record, it won't do anything until it gets a signal. That guarantees that it starts right when I need it to, and then now ends right when I need it to get at least theoretically a perfect loop. There's some wrinkles there, but we'll get to that in a second. This works with either recording external stuff in, or if you are resampling, which is what I'm going to do in this case. So I've got resampling turned on. Okay, so it got that. It's taking its time to think about it. And now, if I just pop open a new project, that sounds like it should be a perfect loop. Let me change my product tempo to something else just to show you this with tempo matching or beat match. Did you hear that little double kick at the end, though? It's not perfect. It seems like there's some imprecision happening in the recording and resampling process. Or for another example, here's this kind of chill little progressive house thing. I resampled that with the fixed sample length recording and brought it onto a pad and did the beat match thing. And so far it seems like it's working pretty well. Let me change this pattern back to just 1 bar. Seems like it's working all right. But watch this. Hear that little flam? Somewhere in the recording process, there's like a little bit of imprecision. And so you can mitigate this by like very minutely tweaking the tune knob. Oh, that's worse. And it's a little bit unpredictable in how it behaves sometimes. So my initial thought when I learned about both of these features was that you could basically turn this into like an infinite vaporwave generation machine where you like make a little beat, resample it, and then beat match it to be way slowed down to create something that sounds a lot trippier. And like this is a vibe, but there are some imprecisions in the recording bit of that chain, meaning that it's gonna be fiddly. It's not as clean as I would have hoped, and just, you know, set your expectations going in. So that's all of the beat matching and fixed length recording stuff. It all kind of goes together and almost works. Here's the last thing that they added, which is quite nice, is they added the ability to customize your grid effects. So if I pop open the grid effects, by default, it'll go to the grid effects layout that you specified in components for that specific pack. But now you can modify these on a project by project basis, which is neat. So for instance, just as a quick demonstration, you'll notice I've got 2 separate phasers here and a couple of vinyls here. If I go into this next project, which is like a carbon copy of the first one, I've got different stuff here. Different phaser, bit crusher here. I don't think I really touched the vinyls much. So let me show you how to actually edit those. Go into your grid effects And you will notice this second white pad is present. If you press that, you are now in the mode to edit your grid effects. I should also mention, if you select any of your grid effects, you'll see these pads light up. You can change their parameters like momentarily, but then the second you toggle that effect off, they'll revert. So let me just show you. Let me just do something really blatant and swap this effect out entirely. Always, knob number 2 will swap out the effect. But then if I let that go, it's back to its original phaser. But if I press this button right here, aka what is now the Grid Effects Editor button, and I swap this out, this is our auto filter. And then I toggle that off. That is now saved. And if I save that, that's saved in my project, which is pretty cool. There is documentation for what all of these knobs do and what all of the grid effects are and like what their parameters are. I do highly recommend checking that out. If you go to the Novation website and go to downloads, go to Circuit Rhythm, you can download the firmware 2.0 mini manual. I do recommend checking that out if you want to like get really in depth with tweaking this stuff hands-on. In my case, I'm kind of like doing it by ear because that's more fun. So let's just do another one for good measure. Let's keep it the vinyl theme. I'm happy with that. And so if you've done your kind of like vaporwave generator thing, you could then latch your grid effects and then record this. And then record that, you can end up with this just super duper lo-fi, well, lo-fi or vaporwave or something like that. Something that sounds super pleasingly degraded. Once again, we're getting into like a little bit of SP404 territory, although note, if you want to resample with the vinyl sim on, the crackle will trigger the resampling like instantaneously. So if you're trying to do fixed length resampling, probably don't have the vinyl filter on. And yeah, in case you didn't know, this keeps the grid effects on whether or not you're holding them down. And you can resample with grid effects latched, which is pretty cool. And now you just have the opportunity to hands-on fine-tune them without ever having to use components, and you can do it on a project-by-project basis. So if you're trying to do some kind of cool performance stuff, you could get really in depth with this really quickly. And those are the updates. I've got another Circuit Rhythm video coming in the next 2-ish weeks that I actually filmed like a while before I even knew the firmware update was on the way, just about how I'm using it as a part of my normal music production setup. So get subscribed if you don't want to miss it. And if you need a complete beginner's tutorial for the rhythm, I've got you covered. You can check this out over here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit.